It's incredible, isn't it, that the things that are true safety feel unsafe to the mind.
Yeah.
And I'm intrigued by that because you've studied the mind, you've studied addiction, you've studied healing, you've studied trauma. Why is it that we seek certainty and stability when you earlier also said that the only time we experience growth is the opposite, when we're vulnerable? Why is it that we're so addicted to things staying the same or things not changing? Like that seems to be a core human addiction.
Well, a therapist once said to me that it has to do with the nature of the mind that you're referring to. A therapist once said to me that if your parents didn't know how to hold you, you develop the mind you hold yourself with. So you find safety in this mind that you created. And so the human mind, the ordinary egoic human mind, is basically a defensive structure. It's, in significant ways, it's a response to pain. That's not all it is, but in significant ways, it's a response to pain. It's afraid of pain, and it's designed to keep you from experiencing pain. So it's worried, and it's anxious, and it's defensive. So when it comes to change and vulnerability, the mind wants to defend against it. And so it comes out of fear, which comes out of childhood experience, where the pain that you had wasn't held. And therefore, you develop these mind structures to keep you from experiencing it. And I mean, one of them clearly is addiction. And, Keith Richards, the world's most famous former heroin addict, the Rolling Stone guitarist, said about addiction, for example, his heroin use, that the contortions you go through just not to be yourself for a few hours. Now, why would somebody not want to be themselves? Because it hurts so much at some point to be yourself. And then a mind comes in and tries to protect you from that pain of being yourself, with its ideas and its beliefs and its certainties and its endless desires and its artificial needs. And it's afraid to let go. Because if I let go, I'll be a helpless child again. So the mind largely is a defensive structure, and then often will react that way.
That defensive structure obviously sets us up for so much. What is happening inside that makes two people react completely differently to the same thing? Right? You could have a parent that's a drug addict and one of the children goes, I'm never going to have drugs ever again because I saw what it did to my parents. And the other person actually imitates the behavior and goes down the same path. What have you found or seen that at a young age creates that different journey?
Well, the first thing to say is that no two children have the same two parents, and no two children have the same childhoods, even though they grew up in the same biological family. Because first of all, one of them came along at a different time. So they had a different set of experiences. There's the birth order. That affects how children experience the parents. Then there's degrees of sensitivities. So some people are born more sensitive than others. Sensitive, again, comes from the Latin word sensire, to feel. So the more sensitive we are, the more we feel. Given the right environment, a nourishing, supportive, grounded environment, that sensitive child just becomes an intuitive, a creator, an artist, an actor, a leader. But in an environment where there's pain, that sensitive child suffers more pain than the less sensitive one. So he'll have more of a reason to escape from the pain. It's not so much that he imitates the behavior of the adult, it's that he takes the same escape route. And addictions are always, in my view at least, an escape route from pain. So it has to do with birth order, with family circumstances, degrees of sensitivity. Having said that, the other child who doesn't become an addict hasn't necessarily escaped. They just may have developed different coping mechanisms. They might have become one of these people that are going to make a big success in the world out of themselves, and they're never going to fail, and they have to be the best, and they're going to suffer too. They just might suffer in a different way.
That sensitivity you're talking about is probably one of the biggest questions I get asked right now, and I want to ask it to you because I feel your experience could offer some real light on it. I feel people are experiencing so much sensitivity and empathy that they just can't stand the world we live in today.
There are people like that.
And I hear this again and again where it's like whether it's the political climate or the economic climate or their family have addictions or friends, like everything that you talk about in the book, And people feel this can't be my home. Like this is not the place I want to live in. And so just as you were saying earlier that someone may have the thought, I don't want to be myself or feel like myself for a few hours, people say, well, this doesn't feel like the world I want to live in. I'm sure you've met many people who've felt that way, seen that way, or maybe even talked that way.
Have I met people? Let me tell you something.
Or worked with people.
I had an experience with ketamine a few years ago. This is a ketamine training for healers, and I was injected with ketamine. It was taking me where it was taking me, and all of a sudden I found myself screaming, I hate the world. That was good that it came out of me. So I totally know what you're talking. I'm just saying that personally, I personally know what you're talking about. Okay, so here's the thing. I think a lot of that has to do with that. First of all, the world is getting more stressed. It's getting more split. Everybody sees that. It's getting more hostile in a lot of ways. It's getting less welcoming and more dangerous, more alienating. On the one hand, on the other hand, we're more and more alone with it. Isolation and loneliness are rising. So if people experience pain and change and stress or even danger communally, it's bearable. But when we're alone with it, it becomes less and less bearable. And so one of the major factors driving, I think, the sensitivity that you're describing is just how alone people feel, which is not how we're meant to be. So that the capitalist values of aggressive, individualistic, ruthless greed and competition against everybody else, that doesn't reflect human needs or even human nature, not as we evolved. But the more the world gets that way, and the more isolated we become, the more vulnerable we are to be hurt by the world that we live in. And I think that's what people are talking about.